A boy was chased down the carriage by his stepmother on the plateau alone. Suddenly, a millionaire appeared out of nowhere and took the boy away. Not long after, he himself burst into tears when, "Honey, it won't be long now. We'll be together soon." Her voice floated like syrup, slow, sticky, insincere. Lorraine Bennett cupped one gloved hand over the speaking horn, lowering her voice as she leaned back into the carriage's worn cushion. The lace on her sleeve fluttered with the wind seeping through the open window. Outside, nothing but dry hills and the pale blur of prairie stretched toward nowhere. Inside, Noah Bennett sat stiffly on the edge of the bench opposite her, small hands folded over a wooden frame wrapped in a white cloth. A man's photograph rested beneath the fabric, its corners softened with age. The eyes in the photo were gentle, the mouth serious but kind. He stared out as though trying to hold the boy still. Lorraine snapped the speaking horn shut. "Noah!" she barked, turning abruptly. "Enough sulking. Get your things. We'll be in town by dusk, and you will not embarrass me." Noah didn't move. His eyes were on the photograph, unmoving. She slapped the frame from his hands. It hit the floor with a hollow clap. "I said, now, Noah." Still silent, the boy leaned over, retrieving the frame. He wiped the dust off the corner with his sleeve, careful, focused. His jaw was tight, but his hands were steady. The photograph, barely 4 inches wide, showed a man in a work shirt and a crooked smile. Noah's father, taken 2 months before the mine collapsed. Noah didn't speak. He only shifted slightly, as if to shield the image from her voice. Lorraine sighed. "Honestly, you make everything harder than it needs to be." She snapped her fan closed, muttered something about dust, and then, without warning, banged the carriage door open. "Out. Here. Now." The horses slowed as the wheels rumbled to a stop in the middle of nowhere. Dry grass stretched on either side, like old straw left too long in the sun. Noah looked up, unsure she was serious. "I said get out. Now take your little bundle of junk with you." Noah moved slowly. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't even surprised. He reached for the cloth bag at his feet, still clutching the photograph. As he climbed down, Lorraine tossed the bag carelessly into the dirt, scattering its contents: clothes, a broken harmonica, and a hand-sewn handkerchief embroidered with the word, Dad. The wind caught it. "You're just a burden, Noah. I did what I could," she said coldly, not even looking at him. Silas, sitting up front, twisted around briefly. His mouth curved in a smirk. "Kid should learn early. No one owes you love." The carriage jerked forward, wheels spitting dust into the air. Within seconds, the sound of the horses faded, swallowed by the wind and the open sky. Noah stood still. He watched the handkerchief tumble across the dirt road like a pale leaf. He didn't run after it at first. Only when it nearly vanished into the ditch did he move. He chased it down, grabbed it in both hands, and sat there. Knees in the gravel, hands around the only thing he had left that felt like truth. A long silence stretched over the plain. Then, in the distance, the soft crunch of hooves against dry ground. A tall figure on horseback slowed as he approached. His coat was sun-faded, hat pulled low, and eyes sharp, with something that wasn't pity, just presence. The man dismounted without a word. The horse, a dark roan with a white blaze, remained still. He walked toward Noah, not quickly, not slowly, just directly. The boy turned, but didn't rise. He held the handkerchief tighter. The man stopped a few feet away, hands resting on his belt. "Do you have anyone waiting for you, son?" Noah shook his head once, eyes on the dirt. The man crouched to his level. Up close, he smelled of leather, smoke, and something clean like cedar. "What's your name?" Noah hesitated. "Noah." The man nodded. "Well, Noah. From this moment forward, you're not alone." There was no softness in the words, only a kind of certainty that felt warmer than kindness. The man stood up and extended his hand. "Come on, let's get out of the wind." Noah looked at the hand, looked at the endless sky behind it, and then stood. He placed the handkerchief in his shirt pocket, fingers lingering a moment longer than needed. Then he reached out and took the man's hand. They walked side by side to the horse. The man lifted Noah up gently, then swung into the saddle behind him. The horse moved forward with barely a nudge. The wind was quieter now. "What's your name?" Noah asked. The man looked down at the boy. "Elias Granger." Noah didn't smile, but his shoulders dropped just a little. Relief had a sound, and sometimes it was silence. As they disappeared down the road, the dust behind them settled slowly, covering the last signs of what had just been left behind. The moon hadn't risen yet, but the sky was already surrendering. Faded pinks hung over the plain like fabric strung from invisible poles. Wind moved through the tall grass in slow, indecisive waves, and somewhere in the distance, a bird called once, and then fell silent. Noah sat beside Elias on the wagon's bench, knees pulled in, hands pressed flat against the wood. He hadn't asked where they were going, but now, with the sky darkening and the air turning colder, something inside him stirred. He spoke without turning. "Why did you stop?" Elias didn't respond at first. He flicked the reins gently, guiding the horse along the dirt path toward Red Rock. The ranch was still a few miles out, but the land was starting to change, less wild, more deliberate. "I guess I figured you needed someone," Elias said after a pause. "And I was looking for someone too." Noah didn't answer, but he looked at Elias for the first time since they'd left the road. The man's face was unreadable, lit only in profile by the last light. Not kind, not cold, just steady. "Someone like a son?" Noah asked quietly. Elias nodded. That would be about right. Noah went back to watching the land, letting the wheels roll under him, like thunder on a far horizon. When the wagon pulled into the yard, the porch light was already on. Not bright, just a single lamp, with its light tucked under the overhang like it had grown tired of standing straight. From the kitchen window, the faint clatter of pans could be heard. Ruth stepped onto the porch holding a towel over one shoulder and a bowl in her hand. She didn't ask questions. She didn't greet Elias with surprise. She simply walked to the edge of the steps, set the bowl down, and handed Noah a folded cloth. "Wash your face and hands." "That's all," she said. Then she turned and disappeared back inside. Ruth Velasquez had worked at Red Rock since before most of the hired hands could read. She had raised 5 siblings on her own in the foothills of Sonora and cooked for oil men, soldiers, and widowers long before Elias had ever lost his own family. She didn't waste questions or comfort. Her love was in hot soup and clean linens, in the way she handed you a bowl without asking if you were hungry. Noah blinked. The towel was warm. The bowl held water that steamed in the cool evening air. Billy rode past the barn a few moments later, his hat low and his dog trailing behind, tongue lolling. He slowed when he saw the boy, gave a half nod, then tossed him a green apple before urging the horse forward again. "Welcome to the end of the road, kid," he called over his shoulder. Billy Myers had grown up drifting from ranch to ranch until Elias took him in at 17. He was quick with his hands and quicker with his mouth, known to fight when he had to and laugh when he didn't. But he had a soft spot for strays, dogs, people, broken things. He treated them all the same, like they might surprise you if you gave them a chance. Noah caught the apple. He didn't eat it. Elias didn't speak much as he led the boy through the main hallway. The floorboards creaked in long, soft notes. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke, old books, and something sharp. Perhaps lemon polish, perhaps just time. He stopped in front of a door. "This is yours," he said, opening it. The room was small but clean. A bed with a plaid quilt, a dresser with 2 empty drawers, and a wooden chair facing the window. The floor was made of pine boards that still held the scent of sap. On the nightstand sat a glass of water and a single unlit lamp. Noah stepped in slowly, eyes moving from corner to corner like he was learning the room by shape, not by detail. He didn't speak. Elias stood silently in the doorway for a long moment, then turned to look at the room next to it. His eyes lingered on the closed door. "She used to sleep there," he said, more to the hallway than to Noah. Noah looked up. He didn't ask who she was. Elias didn't explain. He nodded once more, then left, letting the silence close the door. Outside, Pete sat under the awning, carving something from a block of oak. His hands moved slow and certain, chipping away as if the shape had always been inside the wood and just needed coaxing. When Ruth walked past, he didn't look up. "The boy looks familiar," Pete muttered, voice like gravel soaked in tobacco. Ruth didn't stop walking. "All kids look the same when they're hurting," she said. That night, the wind came up just after midnight. It wasn't strong, but it had teeth, small, sharp ones that bit through cracks in the windows and under doors. Noah lay on his side, still fully dressed, the quilt pulled over him, but not tucked. His eyes stayed open. He could hear the house groaning quietly, not like it was old or falling apart, but like it had grown used to waiting, used to carrying weight that people didn't say out loud. The handkerchief was under his pillow. His fingers rested lightly against it, tracing the embroidered edge like braille. DADA floorboard creaked outside. Then silence. Somewhere downstairs, the clock struck once. Just once. Noah exhaled softly, the kind of breath that wasn't for relief or sleep, but to prove he was still here. The wind slipped past the eaves like a whisper and kept moving on. Somewhere beyond the barn, a rooster cleared its throat, once half-hearted, then fell quiet, as if it too wasn't sure whether the day was worth waking for. A low mist hugged the ground, clinging to the troughs and fence posts like a memory that had nowhere else to go. The morning wasn't loud. It unfolded slowly, with sounds that didn't demand attention, the clink of metal pail against pump, a faint sizzle from the kitchen, and the hush-hush of leaves stirring in the orchard wind. At Red Rock, dawn didn't arrive with ceremony. It drifted in sideways, like someone who belonged, but preferred not to be noticed. In the kitchen, Ruth poured warm water into a basin and placed it on the table next to a bar of lye soap and a hand towel. "Come here," she said. Noah stepped in, still barefoot. His hair was tousled and sticking in odd directions, his shirt one size too big and buttoned wrong at the collar. He paused, like he wasn't sure the water was meant for him. Ruth didn't repeat herself. She just pointed to the basin and stepped aside. Noah washed his hands, rubbing them slow, almost uncertain. When he reached for the towel, she handed it to him, not roughly, but without softness either. She placed a bowl of cornmeal porridge in front of him, then slid a wooden spoon beside it. He sat, held the spoon like it might cut him, and stirred the surface once. "Eat," Ruth said. He looked at her. "I'm not asking you to talk," she added. "I'm asking you to eat." He nodded. Ruth didn't sit. She busied herself at the stove, cracking eggs into a pan, her movements neat and practiced. She had seen plenty of children who didn't speak, who hovered at the edge of rooms like ghosts, not ready to be laid to rest. Some came around with time, others never did. She didn't waste effort trying to guess which kind Noah would be. Behind them, the screen door creaked. Billy's voice followed. "Mornin'. House still standing?" No one set the rooster on fire, I take it. Ruth rolled her eyes but didn't turn. I'm out back, he added, then ducked out before she could respond. Noah had paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. Billy? He asked, almost too soft to hear. Billy Myers, Ruth said. Does more good than he lets on. Does more stupid than we ask for. Noah's lips twitched, not quite a smile. He finished the bowl in silence. The barn smelled of hay, weathered leather, and old wood warmed by sunlight. Horses shifted in their stalls, huffing softly, tails swishing at the occasional fly. Billy stood by a roan gelding, brushing its flank with one hand and drinking coffee from a tin mug with the other. There he is, Billy said, as Noah stepped into view. Didn't figure you'd show. Noah shrugged. Billy pointed the brush toward the corner. Brushes are there. Grab one. No instructions beyond that. No offers of help. Just a nudge toward the tools and the horse. Noah did as told. His grip on the brush was awkward at first, but he figured it out. The gelding shifted a little, then settled, tail stilling. Noah moved along its side slowly, rhythm evening out. You ever done this before? Billy asked. Noah shook his head. You're doing fine. That was it. No praise, no correction. After a long pause, Noah asked, Why does the horse let me? Billy glanced at him. Because you're not trying to prove anything. Later that afternoon, Elias stood at the edge of the corral, arms folded across his chest. He wasn't watching Noah directly, just taking in the whole scene. The way the boy stood beside the horse, how he didn't flinch when it nudged his shoulder, how he didn't talk much, but didn't run either. Keep an eye on him, Elias said to Ruth, who had joined him without a word. He's fine, she said. I know. They stood there a while. Neither of them mentioned the door that hadn't been opened in years, the one across from the boys' room. Pete spent most of the day on the porch, a knife in one hand and a block of red oak in the other. He didn't hum or whistle, but the sound of blade against wood was steady, almost musical. By late afternoon, the shape had taken form. A horse mid-stride, carved lean and clean, with just enough detail to feel alive. He dusted it off, looked it over, then set it gently in front of Noah's door like an offering, and walked away without knocking. In the storage shed behind the stables, Noah wandered through the dust motes and old tack, fingers trailing over unused gear. On a cluttered shelf, half hidden by a coiled bridle, lay a wooden flute, rough, unfinished, its surface worn by time. He reached for it, touched it lightly, then pulled his hand back. He didn't pick it up, just stood there for a moment, then left. That night, Ruth sat on the front steps with her knitting basket at her side. The air smelled of lavender and cut grass. She hummed a lullaby in Spanish, low, slow, almost under her breath. Her voice wasn't sweet, but it was full. Behind the screen door, Noah stood in shadow, not moving. The song reached him through the slats, curling around the edges of the wood like smoke. He didn't step outside, didn't ask what the song meant. But he listened. And for the first time since he arrived, his shoulders dropped. Rain had passed through the night before, the kind that didn't announce itself with thunder, just arrived with weight. The earth outside was damp, the kind of wet that lingered in the boards and made the hinges of every door groan a little louder. Clouds still drifted low that morning, reluctant to leave. There was no wind, just a hush that stretched across the fields like someone had laid a heavy hand over the land and told it to keep still. Ruth filled the tin washtub halfway with warm water, her back to the door. She didn't say anything when Noah came in, barefoot again, arms crossed in that quiet way he had, like he didn't want to touch more of the world than he had to. She pointed with her chin. Leave your shirt there. Get in. He hesitated. She didn't push. After a beat, he moved, slowly. The shirt came off without sound. He stepped into the tub, the metal creaking faintly under his weight. She said nothing at first, dipping a cloth into the water, wringing it out with practiced hands. But when she came behind him and saw the bruises, faint now, yellowing at the edges like spoiled fruit, her hands paused mid-air. Across his shoulders, a diagonal mark. Near his ribs, the shadow of an old welt. She didn't ask where they came from. She didn't need to. Ruth began to wash him with short, firm strokes. Efficient, not gentle, but not punishing. When she finished, she dried him quickly, then pulled a small tin from the shelf and scooped a pale salve onto her fingers. She rubbed it across his back with steady pressure. This'll keep the skin from tightening. You don't want it to pull later. Noah didn't flinch, but he didn't speak either. Next time, you do this yourself, she added. No one's washing your back when you're 12. She handed him a clean shirt. He pulled it on, quiet as the sky. That afternoon, Annie Bell arrived in a wagon filled with crates of books. She was a narrow woman with good posture, thick spectacles, and a voice that could hush children from 20 feet. She greeted Ruth with a brief nod and walked straight into the side room they used for lessons. Noah sat cross-legged at the back, pencil in hand, eyes scanning the drawings in an illustrated primer about horses. He didn't look up when she entered. Annie set a stack of books on the table and began writing on the chalkboard. The lesson wasn't loud or cheery. It was methodical, like someone tuning a clock. Now and then, she glanced at Noah. He never spoke, but his drawings were exact. Horses mid-gallop, bridles taut, hooves tucked. No shading, no background. Just line after line of precision, like he was remembering something, not imagining it. After class, she crouched next to him and tapped the paper lightly. "You see details most kids don't," she said. Noah kept his eyes down. She didn't press. She just nodded once and said, "Keep drawing." Later, Mira Dawson came by on foot, a satchel over her shoulder and a thick braid falling down her back. She greeted Ruth with a wave and walked toward the porch where Noah sat with the carved wooden horse on his lap. Without asking, she sat beside him. She opened the satchel and pulled out a book, its cloth cover worn but intact. She held it out, letting him see the title, The Boy and the Moon King. The name of the author was written in the corner, James A. Dawson. "My father read it to me when I was your age," she said. "He always skipped the sad parts, but I went back and read them myself later." Noah didn't reach for it. She placed the book beside him, not touching his hand. "Everyone needs a story that belongs to them," she said, rising. Before she left, she added, "Even if it starts sad." Out by the fence line, Billy was working a knot in the rope, muttering under his breath. "Stupid knot's tighter than a banker's wallet." Noah stood nearby, silent, watching. Billy looked up, squinting. "You just gonna stare, or you gonna help me feel like less of an idiot?" Noah stepped forward, leaned to inspect the knot. He didn't say anything, but his hands moved quickly, loosening the line with 2 firm tugs. Billy blinked. Well, hell. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. "I was going to keep this for myself, but I'm a generous man." He held out a wooden flute, simple but smooth, the finger holes carved clean. It looked old, well used, but not broken. "Don't worry if it sounds like a dying duck," Billy said. "You only get better if you don't quit." Noah took it, but didn't put it to his lips. Billy slapped him gently on the shoulder. "You ain't got to play now, just know you can." That evening the sun dipped low behind the eucalyptus tree that stood near the back pasture. Its trunk was white-grey, smooth and cold-looking even in summer. The branches stretched out like arms, half raised to the sky. Elias stood under it, hands in his coat pockets. Noah came up behind him, unsure if he should interrupt. Elias spoke first, eyes still on the tree. "She used to climb it every summer," he said. "Wouldn't come down until I bribed her with pie." Noah said nothing. Elias tilted his head slightly. "She was 10 when she died. Fever took her in less than 2 days." The silence stretched between them. Not awkward, just wide. "I didn't bring you here to replace her," Elias said. Noah looked up. "But I also didn't bring you here to forget." They stood a little longer before turning back toward the house, the tree casting long shadows behind them. Noah sat on his bed that night, the flute resting beside the wooden horse. He picked it up once, turned it over, then set it back down. He didn't try to play. Instead, he reached for the book Mira had given him, opened the first page, and ran his fingers over the title, like it was something sacred. The Boy and the Moon King. The window was open. The breeze brought in the scent of eucalyptus and something warm, cornbread maybe, or clean wool. He lay back, eyes on the ceiling, and whispered one word under his breath, just once. "Story." Then he closed his eyes. The first sign something was off came from the square. Friday market mornings at Elk Bend usually brought a rhythm. Predictable, unhurried, laced with the smell of fresh bread and dust from the road. But on this one, it arrived with the crisp clip of polished boots and the over-perfumed trail of trouble dressed in silk. Lorraine Bennett descended from the wagon like she was stepping onto a stage. Her dress was the color of ripe cherries, tight at the waist, and her hat too large for practicality. Silas Trent, beside her, wore a tailored black coat that he hadn't earned, and a smirk that had never known sincerity. Together, they made a pair you could hear coming, even when they didn't speak. Maggie O'Hara looked up from behind the counter of her store, just as Lorraine walked in, all smiles and sweeping glances. "Well, look at this little town still stuck in time," Lorraine said, her voice syrup-thick. "Some things never change." Maggie didn't answer right away. She set a crate of jars on the floor, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked around the counter. "What are you looking for, Lorraine?" she asked flatly. "Oh, nothing in particular. Just passing through. Thought I'd see who's still around," Lorraine replied, her smile tight. "Thought I might grab a few things for the road." Maggie stepped back, folded her arms. "This store doesn't sell to strangers who only smile with their mouths." For a moment, the room froze. Silas looked amused. Lorraine blinked, then tilted her head. "You always were quaint, Maggie. And you always had bad timing," Maggie shot back. Word travels fast in small towns, faster than wagons, faster than lies. Before the hour was up, someone had whispered the wrong name in the wrong ear. Silas's expression sharpened when he heard it. "Red Rock," he said. Lorraine raised an eyebrow. "You thinking what I'm thinking? I think a rich old man doesn't adopt a boy for free." The next morning, Red Rock woke to the clatter of hooves on the front road. Sheriff Albert Monroe arrived first, tall, paunchy, with a badge that shone brighter than his spine. He had served the county for nearly 20 years, mostly writing citations for drunken farmers and mediating fence disputes. His sense of justice was like his sense of direction, easily swayed by the nearest strong opinion. His boots hit the dirt with hesitation, and the paper in his hand shook slightly in the breeze. A few steps behind him came Brenda Leeds, dressed in a pale green coat that didn't suit the dust. She walked fast, eyes fixed forward. Brenda had worked in the county social office just long enough to forget why she'd taken the job. The badge on her coat pocket said, "Child Welfare Representative," but the glint in her eyes said, "Expediency over empathy." To her, paperwork was proof, not people. Elias stood on the porch. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just waited. "Elias," Monroe said, clearing his throat, "we've received a claim of legal guardianship from the boy's stepmother." Brenda stepped forward. "We have official documentation filed in Sanderson County. If he was removed without proper consent—" "He wasn't removed," Elias said. "He was left." "That doesn't negate custodial rights," Brenda insisted. Ruth stepped out behind Elias, arms crossed. "It negates decency." Monroe shifted uncomfortably. "We're just here to confirm—" "No," Elias interrupted. "You're here because someone paid to make noise." The silence that followed was too full to be broken with small talk. Brenda looked like she had more to say, but Elias didn't give her space for it. He simply said, "You want to see the boy. He's not property. He chooses who he speaks to." Down by the stables, Noah had already seen them from a distance. Lorraine's silhouette was unmistakable, the red dress, the posture like royalty in exile. He didn't wait. He slipped between fence posts, through the open gate of the barn, and crouched behind the second stall where the smell of hay was strongest. He clutched the handkerchief in both fists, pressing it so tightly the embroidered letters wrinkled in his palms. Footsteps approached, but they didn't echo the way Lorraine's heels would. It was Ruth. She found him without calling his name, just sat beside him on the straw, hands resting on her knees. The two of them stayed there like that for a while. "Want me to tell them you're not here?" she asked softly. Noah didn't answer. His shoulders were stiff, but his breath wasn't shaking. Ruth looked ahead, her voice barely above the hum of flies in the rafters. "People like that, they talk loud because they're scared no one's listening." Noah turned toward her, just slightly. She met his eyes. "No one's touching you while I'm breathing. That's the whole story." He nodded, just once. Outside, Silas leaned on the gate like he owned the dust it kicked up. When Elias approached, Silas greeted him with a thin smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Fancy spread you've got here," Silas said. "Big place for just one boy." Elias didn't return the smile. "What do you want?" "To see the child," Silas replied smoothly. "We are concerned. He's family." Number he was a Czech. Silas raised his eyebrows. "That's a bold accusation." Elias shrugged. "Truth doesn't always ask permission." Lorraine came up behind Silas, voice sugary and sharp. "We just want to make sure he's okay. You know, after being ripped away from us." Elias stepped forward, not aggressive, just steady. "You left him on the road." Lorraine's smile wavered. "That's your version." "It's the boy's version," Elias said, "and I believe him." Brenda glanced between them, her legalese withering in the dry heat. Sheriff Monroe looked ready to be anywhere else. Silas sighed. "Well, paperwork's filed. I'm sure this won't be the last conversation." "Then, bring more than your words next time," Elias said. "Bring facts." The wind picked up again that afternoon, pushing leaves in spirals along the fence line. The barn doors creaked open slightly, letting in strips of light. Pete sat whittling near the tool shed, eyes narrowed. He didn't say much, but when Ruth passed him on the way back from the stables, he muttered just loud enough for her to hear. "They're gonna try something." Ruth didn't break stride. "Then they better try harder than that." Inside the barn, Noah climbed into the hayloft, the handkerchief still in his hand. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. But later that night, after the sun went down and the lights in the main house blinked out one by one, he took out the flute. For the first time, he blew into it. It made a crooked, trembling sound, more breath than note. He didn't stop. He tried again, and again, and slowly, through the night air that smelled of horses and dust, came a sound that wasn't music yet, but was no longer silence. The afternoon held its breath the way only western skies could, quiet, stretched thin between shadow and sunlight. Dust from the road hadn't settled yet, and the smell of lavender from Ruth's window box tangled with the scent of horses and something faintly metallic, like a storm that had changed its mind. Ruth didn't look like she was in a hurry, but her steps down the main street of Elk Bend carried a tension that even the loose gravel seemed to notice. She stopped outside a small flower shop with fading paint and a crooked wind chime hanging by the door. Inside, Clara Bell was arranging lilies. White ones, the kind that said more in silence than words ever could. "Still can't believe they had the nerve to come back," Clara said without turning. Ruth didn't answer. She stepped closer to the counter, fingers tracing the grain of the old wood. Her eyes were steady, but her jaw tightened slightly. "You remember that day I came asking for work?" Clara asked, voice low. Ruth nodded once. She laughed, said this place didn't need another tired woman with calloused hands. Clara's lips curled, not in humor. "Didn't even look at my flowers." Ruth's face didn't move for a full second. Then something in it went very still. She's always been louder than she is smart. Behind them, someone cleared a throat. Mira Dawson stood by the open door, a book under one arm and a brow arched higher than most, dared. "I heard everything," she said. Clara opened her mouth, but Mira was already turning to Ruth. "That's the woman who left him." Ruth nodded. "Then she's not just unkind, she's dangerous." And without another word, Mira walked out, notebook already open, pencil in hand. Later, on the edge of the south pasture, Billy leaned on the fence rail while the sky began to pinken. He spoke like he wasn't sure anyone was listening. "Last week, I found Noah sitting in the middle of the field during a rainstorm." Elias glanced sideways. "Doing what?" "Holding his coat over a stray pup," Billy said. "Soaked to the bone, both of them." He shook his head, then smiled a little. Didn't say a word, just kept the dog dry. In the schoolhouse that doubled as Red Rock's tiny library, Annie Bell took a seat at her writing desk. The light was low, the oil lamp sputtering like it didn't want to stay awake. She picked up a pen and began writing, slowly. "Dear Judge Dawson, some wounds don't sit on the skin. They hide behind silence, behind the way a child won't sit with his back to the door. I've seen enough to know what kind of harm leaves that behind. Please come. Come before someone signs off on a mistake that can't be reversed." She folded the letter, sealed it with wax, and set it beside the window for the next rider. At Maggie's store, the bell above the door rang sharp. "I kept this," Maggie said, handing Ruth a folded envelope. "Came last week. No return address, but I know that perfume. It's the kind you wear when you're not used to being looked at, unless you force it." Ruth opened the letter slowly. It was a venomous mess of half-truths and accusation, filled with twisted implications about Elias's motives and past. "She's sending this to folks all over," Maggie said, trying to paint him as some kind of collector. Ruth didn't speak. She folded the letter again, precise. "Her mouth never knew what truth tasted like," Maggie added. In the quiet of the stables, Pete sat sharpening a hoof rasp, the sound like sand sliding over rock. Noah was nearby, brushing one of the mares without being told. Pete watched him for a while, then said, "You ever notice how the wind smells different in different places?" Noah paused. Pete smiled faintly. "Means the land's talking. Where you're from, maybe the wind smelled like creek water or oranges. Here, it smells like dust and hay and iron nails." He leaned forward, voice gentler now. "You don't need to remember where you came from, son. If you can breathe right here, this place can be enough." Noah nodded. Just once. That evening, Mira entered her father's study without knocking. "Tam fan Dawson nin len tu, sao ban lam viek, Dieu chin kin mat. You usually ask before you storm my castle." Mira dropped a file in front of him. Names, affidavits, first-hand accounts. "She's lying," she said. "I've heard things. What she said to Clara, what she tried to do to Ruth. And Maggie showed me the letter. This woman doesn't want a child. She wants a reputation." The judge's brows lowered, thoughtful. "She's Noah's stepmother. She has paperwork." Mira stepped closer. "And I have stories," she said. "Real ones, the kind that don't need signatures to be true." He opened the file. Pages flipped under his fingers like a deck of worn cards. Mira stood tall. "I won't let the law be used as a mask. Not this time." Dawson didn't answer immediately, but his eyes sharpened, and that was more than enough. That night, Ruth sat alone at the kitchen table, knitting set aside. The clock ticked, slow and loud. Outside, somewhere in the dark, the wind shifted direction. Noah stood in the hallway, hand resting on the doorknob, as if weighing whether to open it. And somewhere out in the county, an envelope moved toward a courthouse. It carried a name, but this time it carried a truth too. The wind was dry again by morning, not sharp like it had been during the storm, just restless, lifting the edge of the feed sacks and spinning grit across the yard in short, meaningless swirls. Red rock didn't creak under it. The ranch simply breathed, the way a strong house does when trouble passes through. In the main house, the parlor had been cleared for the doctor. Dr. Wendell Hughes arrived just after breakfast, carrying a leather bag that looked older than any of them. His presence was quiet, but it took up space the way certainty always does. He was the kind of man who rarely made small talk, not because he was unfriendly, but because he'd seen too many truths come with silence. Noah sat on the couch, legs dangling but still, like he was trying to take up less air. Elias stood by the window, arms folded. Hughes pulled out a small penlight and motioned gently. "Noah, may I?" The boy didn't move at first, but after a moment, he nodded once. The doctor crouched, angled the light to one eye, then the other. His hands never touched skin, but they were close. He watched carefully. "Can you follow my finger?" Noah did. "Good. Now, I'm going to tap your knee here just once. Is that all right?" Another nod. The reflex didn't fire, not in either leg. Hughes paused, studied the boy, then leaned back on his heels. His voice was even. "Noah, did anyone ever give you something to drink that made you feel sleepy? Or dizzy?" Noah's eyes flicked to the side. His throat moved, like he wanted to swallow something, but there was nothing there. He didn't answer, but he blinked, 3 times, fast, and then looked away. The doctor didn't press. He stood up, walked over to a side table, and opened a small notebook from his bag. Flipping through pages, he stopped somewhere in the middle and frowned. He ran a finger under a paragraph and muttered, mostly to himself, "Same presentation as Cordell House, 7 years ago." He snapped the notebook closed. Elias turned. "You've seen this before." Hughes nodded, only once. Illegal adoption ring out near Larkspur. They'd sedate kids before meetings, kept them quiet. Took years for some of them to recover. "And the symptoms?" Elias asked. "Loss of deep reflexes, altered pupil response, night tremors, all present." The doctor looked down at his hands. "If there's no history of trauma to the spine, there's only one explanation left." He wrote out a report, slowly, carefully, using words meant for courtrooms more than kitchens. At the bottom, in a slightly messier scrawl, he added a line, not part of any official form. "A boy this age doesn't lose reflexes without help." He handed the paper to Elias, who took it without reading, then sat down at the table. When he did open it, he read every word twice. Then he folded it once, set it aside, and said, "No one should ever be forced into silence with a bottle." Dr. Hughes nodded, then handed Elias the leather-bound notebook. "I've got copies," he said. "This one's yours." Elias ran his fingers over the spine. It was worn, soft in places. People love to talk, the doctor said, but they rarely listen. Paper doesn't interrupt. Paper speaks when people won't. That afternoon, Elias found Noah in the orchard, sitting beneath one of the younger pecan trees with the flute in his lap. He wasn't playing, just holding it. Elias approached slowly, then sat beside him without saying anything. For a while, they both looked ahead, watching nothing. Finally, Elias said, "I used to think loss came like a storm. Loud, fast, easy to spot." Noah glanced at him. "But it doesn't," Elias continued. "It sneaks in, shows up in the corner of your eye. You feel it most when no one's watching." Noah shifted, pulled his knees in tighter. "I had a daughter," Elias said, 12 years ago. She liked apple pie, hated math, always tried to hide her report cards in the woodpile." A small sound, Noah's breath catching maybe. Elias smiled faintly. "She got sick. Nothing anyone could fix. And for the longest time, I thought the worst part was losing her." He looked down at the dirt between his boots. But worse than that was having no one left to tell her stories to. Noah stared at the ground, then whispered, "My dad used to hum when he brushed the horses." Elias didn't speak, just listened. "And he always wore boots, even inside, said socks were for bankers." Elias chuckled softly. Noah kept going, voice low, but steady now. He had a red handkerchief, carried it in his back pocket. He said real men don't care if things are old, just if they're true. Elias reached into his coat and pulled something out. A folded square of cloth. It wasn't red, but it had stitching on the corner, faded, but still readable. Noah blinked. "That's—" "He dropped it," Elias said. "Back when you were left. I kept it in case you wanted it back someday." Noah took it with both hands, fingers trembling just slightly. He held it for a moment before slipping it into his pocket. Then, very softly, he asked, "Do you ever stop missing her?" Elias answered without hesitation. "Number. But you stop being afraid of the missing." They sat in silence again, but it was different now, like something had been said that didn't need repeating. The flute rested across Noah's knees. His fingers moved to the holes, but didn't play. Not yet. But the wind moved through the trees with a rhythm that felt almost like a beginning. The day of the hearing arrived dry and windless. Elk Bend's town hall, which usually held council meetings and potlucks, now held breath. The building, a faded red structure with white trim and a bell that hadn't rung in a decade, strained to contain the people gathered inside. Neighbors, ranchers, teachers, and the simply curious sat shoulder to shoulder, their boots dusting the old wooden floor with more than dirt, expectation, doubt, allegiance. Lorraine arrived in a wine-colored velvet dress, its hem too fine for county dust. Her perfume announced her seconds before her entrance. Silas walked behind her, one hand resting too casually on the small of her back, his posture half proud, half predatory. They settled into their row like royalty, who knew their reign was slipping. At the front, Judge Dawson looked over the room with a quiet that cut sharper than any gavel. He didn't call the court to order with flair. He simply said, "Begin." Brenda Leeds stood first. Her voice was smooth, practiced. She handed out a folder marked Psychological Risk Assessment, speaking with the calm assurance of someone who thought paper outweighed memory. The child in question has exhibited signs of emotional dissociation, prolonged silence, attachment confusion. These are consistent with disrupted environments. We believe he is safest with the last known legal guardian. Murmurs moved like brush fire through the back of the room. Then Dr. Wendell Hughes stepped forward. He carried no file, just a handwritten report and a presence that made people sit straighter. "I've seen the boy," he said, more than once. His voice was even, but his eyes flared with something steadier than anger. "Those symptoms," he said, lifting Brenda's report, "aren't from emotional instability. They're from chemical sedation." He passed his report to the judge. "The reflex tests are clear. Pupil response is clear. His system was interfered with. Likely sedatives, likely systemic." Judge Dawson's brow furrowed. Brenda started to respond, but Hughes spoke first. "And there's no way those symptoms appear naturally in a child that age. None." The silence stretched until Mira stood. She walked forward, not as a lawyer, because she wasn't one, but with the steadiness of someone who had been preparing, not just for this day, but for all the days before it. "I request to speak as a witness," she said. Lorraine leaned forward. "She's not on the docket." Judge Dawson didn't glance at her. "Proceed." Mira stepped into the open space. "I once visited the Bennett home," she began. "Years ago. I remember seeing Lorraine slap the boy so hard he staggered. No one said anything, not even her." Gasps scattered across the room like glass hitting stone. "I remember the sound," she added. "It stayed with me." Lorraine smirked, folding her arms. "That's slander," she whispered. But her voice had cracked. Then came the moment no one expected. Noah stood. He stepped forward slowly, his small shoes tapping quietly against the boards. He didn't speak. Instead, he held out a small, cloth-covered notebook, one Ruth had given him weeks before. The judge looked down, accepted it, and opened the first page. Inside were sketches, words, sentences half-formed but clear, descriptions of bruises, places, times, fragments of overheard insults, a drawing of the barn, a line that said, "She said I wasn't worth the sugar it'd take to sweeten me." The room held its breath. Elias didn't say a word. He just reached out and placed a firm, warm hand on Noah's shoulder. The boy's back was small, but it didn't shake. Across the room, Lorraine laughed. Short, brittle. "This is pathetic," she said. "He was nothing when we found him." But then Silas stood, too quickly, and the room turned. "Sit down, sir," the bailiff warned. But it was too late. A woman in the second row stood up. "I know him," she said. "That's Silas Trent. He ran grift in Carson County, fraud charges in '89, skipped court." The buzz became raw. Mira's eyes never left her father's face. Judge Dawson looked at Silas, then Lorraine. "I suggest you both stop talking," he said, calm as granite. Lorraine, finally realizing she had no more places to stand, hissed, "The boy's not worth this circus." And that was when the judge raised his voice for the first time. "But you are?" he asked. "That's what this was about. Custody for pride." No one spoke again. The judge turned to Noah, then to the room. "I've read enough," he said. "I've seen enough." He signed the final page of the custody decision. The sound of the pen scratching the paper might as well have been a thunderclap. Custody awarded to Elias Granger. Permanently. The courtroom didn't erupt in cheers. It didn't need to. Outside, as the doors opened, the air smelled different, cleaner, like something had broken, but in the way a storm does, hard, loud, and then suddenly quiet. Noah didn't smile, but his shoulders weren't pulled so tightly anymore. Elias walked beside him, the handkerchief now tucked neatly in the boy's pocket, corners peeking out like a flag in retreat. And when the wind stirred the dust again, it carried with it something else. Not a memory, not a scar, a name, spoken without fear. The morning didn't feel like triumph. It didn't feel like anything grand, really, just clearer. The clouds that had clung to the ridge for 2 days had finally broken apart. Like they, too, had been waiting for permission to let go. The bell above Elk Bend's old courthouse hadn't rung in over 10 years, but someone must have pulled the rope that morning, because it sang once, deep and off-key, but real. Inside the building, every seat was taken. Ranchers in dust-worn boots, mothers with quiet children in their laps, teenagers who should have been in school but weren't. They all came, not because the case concerned them, but because it did. Lorraine wore velvet, deep wine-colored, thick as armor. Silas, close behind her, kept one hand at her lower back, like a lock, not a gesture. Brenda Leeds sat 2 rows forward, stiff and polished. Mira stood with a folder in hand. Dr. Hughes remained off to the side, arms folded, watching. And at the center, Elias Granger, still, silent. And Noah, sitting beside him, smaller than anyone in the room, but somehow heavier with presence than them all. Judge Dawson called the hearing to order with no fanfare. Brenda went first, speaking with clipped precision. The boy has displayed signs of dissociative behavior. He demonstrates avoidant tendencies, lacks speech consistency, and shows unclear attachment signals. She held up a sheet titled Psychological Risk Index. In our assessment, it is in the best interest of the child to return to the last legally recorded guardian, Ms. Lorraine Bennett. There were murmurs, not many, but enough to rustle the dust in the corners. Then Dr. Hughes stepped forward. He didn't clear his throat or shuffle papers. He simply spoke. I've examined Noah Granger. He exhibits neurological symptoms consistent with repeated sedation, loss of deep tendon reflex, irregular pupil contraction. These are not signs of emotional trauma alone. These are pharmacological effects. He held out a single-page report, handwritten, concise, brutal. No healthy child loses reflexes without interference. He didn't look at Brenda. He looked at the judge. Let the court understand, what I'm describing doesn't happen by accident. Brenda opened her mouth, but before she could respond, Mira stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice, didn't falter. I request to testify. Lorraine turned in her seat. She's not. She may speak, Judge Dawson said. Mira met the judge's eyes. Then she looked straight at Lorraine. I was 12 when I visited their house. I saw her strike Noah. No reason, no warning. I remember the sound. I remember how he didn't cry, just went quiet, like he'd already learned it wouldn't matter. The courtroom fell completely still. Since then, Mira continued, I've spoken to neighbors. Collected letters. I've heard stories from teachers who tried to file reports and were shut down. I've seen the way he flinches, not from fear, but from memory. Lorraine scoffed. You people act like I'm some kind of monster. He was nothing when we took him in, just a scrawny, feral little thing. That's when Noah stood. He said nothing, but he stepped into the aisle and walked, slow and certain, toward the judge's bench. In his hands, a notebook, worn, cloth-bound, the one Ruth had given him. He held it out. Judge Dawson took it and opened to the first page. The writing inside was uneven, the lines crooked, but the words were there, page after page. She said I was more trouble than money. She said I wasn't worth the sugar it'd take to sweeten me. Drawings followed. Small, stark outlines of horses, a woman's hand raised, a boy crouched behind a door. Then, near the back, a page written just 3 days earlier. I don't remember all of it, but I remember how the quiet felt. I remember how my ribs ached when I breathed. I remember wanting someone to call me back. Silence crushed the room like stone. Then a voice near the back spoke up. A woman, older, sharp-eyed. I know Silas. Carson County. Fraud. Faked insurance claims. Skipped out on court in '89. More voices followed. Quiet ones. From the town. From the bench. From the aisle. Judge Dawson held up a hand, silencing them all. Then he looked at Lorraine. "And your claim," he said quietly, "was for love." Lorraine sneered. "That boy's not worth this much ink." Elias rose then, not quickly, not loud, but the way a stone might rise from soil if the earth gave it permission. He didn't speak to Lorraine, or the court, or the crowd. He placed one hand on Noah's shoulder and said to the judge, simply, "He's worth everything." Judge Dawson didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just signed his name at the bottom of the custody decree and slid the page across the bench. Permanent guardianship granted to Elias Granger. The room didn't erupt. There was no applause, just a breath, a collective, long-held breath, finally let go. Outside, on the steps of the courthouse, Billy waited. When Noah reached him, he pulled something from his coat pocket, a thin strip of hide, hand-cut, stiff and stained. On it were 3 words burned in, "Ngoi Kwa Red Rock." He handed it over without ceremony. "Don't need to wear it. Just don't forget it." Then came Pete, quiet as always. He pressed something into Noah's hand, a pocket knife, dull, smooth, old. "Don't use it for fighting," he said. "Use it to mark what matters." That night, after supper, Noah sat at the little desk in his room. The lamp cast a soft, golden circle of light. The sounds of Red Rock moved outside. Boots on porch steps, a dog barking once, the wind curling under the eaves. He picked up a pencil. He didn't shake. On a blank sheet of paper he wrote, "Noah Bennett Granger." Then again, slower. "Noah Bennett Granger." He folded the page and slid it under his pillow. Elias found it later and read it in silence. His hand lingered over the signature. Then he folded it again, smaller, tighter, and placed it in the inside pocket of his vest. Later that night, he walked to the pantry, tore a square from the calendar, June 4th, and pinned it above the hooks where the aprons hung. He wrote one word in the corner. Began. In the barn loft, under an old quilt stitched with stories only Ruth remembered, Noah lay with the wind whispering through the boards. He closed his eyes and whispered. Not afraid, not unsure, just steady. "My name is Noah." And for the first time, it didn't feel borrowed. The sky over Red Rock turned a shade paler that summer, less storm, more promise. Rain had softened the dirt into something workable, and for the first time in a long while, every nail driven into every board echoed like a drumbeat of something starting. Not healing, not forgetting, but growing. Elias, Ruth, and Mira stood beneath the southern grove of pecan trees, with blueprints spread across the bed of an old wagon. The morning light filtered through the branches like cathedral glass. They spoke in quiet tones, sometimes disagreeing, always returning to the same goal. A new wing of cabins, space for more children. Not just a roof, but a place to belong. Ruth circled a spot on the map with her finger. "We'll need a separate pump line. Can't have all of them sharing the same well." Mira nodded, making a note. "And more lamps for the night. No child should go to sleep in the dark if they don't choose it." Elias didn't say much, but he looked toward the ridge and murmured, "We'll call it the South House." That evening, the hammering started. Billy, sleeves rolled, stood beside a fresh stack of pine boards, barking instructions at 3 teen boys and laughing whenever they got more sawdust in their hair than on the ground. When the first cabin's walls went up, 6 children arrived from Elk Bend and farther. They came in quiet, like deer, holding nothing but cloth bundles and names that sounded uncertain, even in their own mouths. One by one, Ruth met them at the gate. She didn't hug. She didn't ask too much. She just handed each a bar of soap, a towel, and said, "This way." Pete sat in the tool shed that week, knife in hand, carving the same figure over and over, a horse in mid-stride, one for each child. He didn't paint them, didn't wrap them, just left them on pillows by morning with names burned into the bellies, names the children had chosen, names they were trying on like new shoes. Maggie arrived the next day, apron dusted in flour, a box of cinnamon bread under one arm. "They'll eat nervous," she said. "Bread helps." Clara Bell came too. She carried clippings in soil-packed pots, marigolds, mint, and creeping phlox. "Flowers make a place breathe," she said simply, then got down on her knees and started planting. Annie Bell began nightly reading under the lantern light. She didn't choose soft books. She read Twain, Dickinson, Langston Hughes. "Children don't need stories that talk down," she told Ruth. "They need stories that look them in the eye." And they listened, some curled in corners, others at her feet, faces still and wide with a kind of aching attention. Noah was different now, but not distant. He watched the newcomers from a little distance at first, especially Joey, the youngest boy, who refused to sleep without a dog beside him. Joey had brought none, only a ragged doll sewn into his pack. Noah went to the kennels and coaxed an old mutt named Clover to the front. The next morning, Joey woke to paws at his feet and a note beside his bed. "Clover snores. You'll get used to it." When Joey asked later how to wash a dog's ears, Noah knelt beside him and repeated what Billy had once told him. "Gentle hands, always. Like you're listening, not scrubbing." That evening, Ruth sat at her sewing table, finishing the last of a half-dozen scarves, one for each child. She stitched a single word into the corner of each, home. Some letters came out crooked, some perfect. She wrapped them in soft cloth and laid them, folded, at the heads of each bed. She didn't say who they were from, but they knew. At the gate, Pete stood with a ladder and chisel. He worked until dusk, the sky burning orange behind him. By the time Ruth walked up with a mug of tea, he had finished carving a phrase across the top beam. The letters were deep, clean. "Every small soul deserves to be named." She handed him the cup. "That true?" Pete took a sip. "Doesn't matter. It's truer than most things." Down by the corral, Billy watched two of the new boys learn to mount. One fell, the other laughed. Then they swapped places. "You fall, you get up," Billy said. "Red Rock's got dust, not judgment." That night, as lanterns went out one by one, Noah sat beside Joey on the bunkhouse porch. The stars overhead were thick, stitched tight as thread on an old quilt. Clover lay between them, tail thumping. "Think we'll stay long?" Joey asked. Noah looked ahead. "Long enough." Joey blinked. "Long enough for what?" "For the world to stop hurting so much." The wind came up, soft and cool. Somewhere behind them, a rooster muttered in his sleep, and just before bed, Ruth walked past each room, hand brushing over door frames, scarves in place, windows latched. No names were called that night. They didn't have to be. Because for once, they were already known. There are children who grow up without ever being called by their proper name. Not a name on paper, but a name that carries presence, trust, and a place to return to. Red Rock is not a place to shelter the abandoned, but a reminder that every soul, no matter how small, is worthy of being seen, remembered, and loved. We often think that healing requires big things, legalizations, declarations, victories. But sometimes, just a timely touch on the shoulder, a simple word, or a small object that touches a lonely spot can save someone from a lifetime of silence. What about you? In this fast-paced life, have you ever called someone by their proper name, a child, a loved one, or yourself? Are you willing to be red rock for someone, even just once? I hope this story will find comfort in you. If the weather is getting dark, have an early dinner and go to bed early. Have a great day and see you in the next videos.